Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. You have tuned in to The Killer Tea, a podcast hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers. We are your hosts, Christina
and Chelsea.
And thank you for tuning into The Killer Tea. We made it to episode 5.
Heck yeah, we did. I'm so proud of our little side project.
Each time it feels like such a major success. Like, I can't believe we're actually doing this on a routine basis.
We're up to 55 listeners now.
There's more than one person listen to us.
Thanks, guys. We don't have 55 friends.
No, we don't. So
some of y'all are not our friends yet.
Some of you are not our moms.
Hell yeah.
Cheers to not being our moms and listening, but also hi, Mom.
I'm pretty sure my mom doesn't listen to this.
I know my mom doesn't listen to this. I think Ginger might be into some weird shit on the sly.
Could be.
I classify this as weird shit.
Yeah, this is weird shit.
I constantly forget that it is considered weird shit by other people and bring it up in casual conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, my murder podcast.
Hey, I just met you and I co-host a murder podcast.
I just met you and this is crazy. My name's Christina.
I'm obsessed with murder.
And killing ladies. All right, anyways, so today we are talking about our hometown killer.
Heck yeah, Cleveland, Ohio, baby.
Yeah, weird time to feel a sense of pride. Actually, this case pissed me the fuck off.
Trigger warning. This episode will feature lots of talk about rape, strangulation,
incest,
a smidgen of incest. But hey, you know what? We're not talking about necrophilia this week, so I'm happy.
What happened in this house behind me is simply a nightmare, and there are a lot of deeply disturbing questions for authorities here. There were 6 bodies found in this house last week. This morning, we know there are more.
We discovered 4 additional, what we believe to be 4 bodies.
Police believe that they were murdered by this man, Anthony Sowell, a convicted rapist who had been living in the house.
It appears that this man had a insatiable appetite that he had to fill.
I remember this case. I remember hearing about it on the news. Mm-hmm. I remember being horrified when I was,
they
been,
caught him
like 19, 20?
They caught him, I'm pretty sure, right before my 18th birthday. And then I remember hearing about it around my 18th birthday, and then I remember graduating from high school, and then the rest of the results of everything finally coming out sometime in like 2009.
It's just crazy because, we're from near Cleveland, Ohio. Like, we're not from Cleveland itself, but we are very close by.
And we spent a lot of time in Cleveland.
We did.
Chelsea went to school in Cleveland for a hot second.
Yeah.
And I went to school in Parma.
Yeah, I went
to
college in Cleveland, and it's just crazy when you realize that this stuff was happening while I was going to college in Cleveland.
So we're going to start off with his birth and all of that stuff, but a little bit of information for you guys is Cleveland used to be the epicenter of life in Ohio.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was huge for steel industry. The rubber industry was massive in Akron, which is not too far away from Cleveland. I mean, the economy in the 50s, 60s, 70s in Cleveland was just booming.
That's when your grandparents immigrated over here to be a part of the Cleveland Ford industry.
They did.
Ford paid for her grandfather to immigrate.
Well, it wasn't Ford. It was another company.
It was another company?
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it was in the same, career field, though. He was, a skilled tradesman, journeyman, and
And the economy was booming. I mean, it was booming enough that they were taking immigrants from England and bringing them over
They
here.
literally had ads in the newspapers that were like, hey, come to the London consul.
London, oh my God, I'm having such a, I know what you mean.
Yeah, the London immigration. And basically we're just handing out green cards to anyone who had specific qualifications. And they were just like, here you go. Come to America. I mean, my grandparents were about to move to Australia.
Yeah, so that just goes to show that not too long before he's born, or around the time that he's born, the industry in Cleveland is, kind of exploding.
Yeah.
But then the decline started shortly after he was born. So I guess we will start off with the birth of Anthony Sowell.
So Anthony was born in Cleveland, Ohio, like we said, on August 19th, 1959. And his mother, Claudia Benson Garrison, was not married to Anthony's father, Thomas Sowell. And Thomas actually wasn't involved in Anthony's life almost at all.
No, he was absent.
Completely absent. And Anthony lived with his mother, Claudia, and his maternal grandmother, Irene Justice. And they kind of were the heads of the household, maternal figures.
The matriarchs, if you would.
These are some horrible women. I'm not going to lie.
I did some digging to see if whether or not their discipline, though extreme, was considered abusive, because again, it's kind of from that time of hard punishment.
I would call this abusive,
but
is excessive.
So yes, it definitely was. I know some folks from that time and from that era, this was kind of extreme discipline, but it was still socially acceptable.
Okay. So let's talk about this discipline then. So Anthony's cousins lived with them. There were 7 of them total, I believe. And the cousins moved into their home after their mother had died. So the cousins claim that Anthony's mother would often force them to strip butt naked, and she would tie them up with extension cords and then beat them with other extension cords.
And sometimes until they bled.
Yeah. And as a mom, I can't imagine beating a child with an extension cord.
Yeah, this just got some anger issues. Oh no, I just wish I could go back in time and be like, do you know what makes a serial killer?
This is what makes a serial killer.
This is what makes a fucking serial killer.
Although, to be fair, there's not really any evidence that Anthony was ever abused in this way. But he did watch the beatings happen and would often try to get his cousins in trouble so that they would be punished in this way.
Which is odd, because his neighbors and the people in the neighborhood would describe him as a sweet and kind and very respectful child.
Right. He was known for being very quiet and just a good kid and not really any issues. And this was going on in his house.
Their mother passed away from...
She had cancer, I believe.
She had cancer? Is that what it was?
I believe so.
Because in my notes, I just have chronic health problems. But regardless, his home that wasn't filled to the brim initially is now exploding full of people. But he, this fucked up little child, starts raping his niece. He raped his niece and his cousin. His one cousin is Leona. I don't have his sister's name, daughter's name.
I don't either. I just know that Leona said that he would regularly take her upstairs at the Page Avenue house where they lived and would rape her, and she said it happened almost daily.
Almost daily at 11 years old.
And she also said that she tried to report the rapes to authorities and no one believed her.
And he is not... He's a preteen, so he's not much older than her. No. And while he's in school, he's actually getting bullied by his friends at school, or teased relentlessly. Maybe bullied is a bit too strong.
But they're making fun of him and saying, he's a skinny and shy kid. They're saying that he's not having sex with anyone. And at this point in high school,
that's a big deal.
That's a big deal. And he didn't really have any girlfriends or anything like that. He was just kind of a shy, awkward kid, and at home he's raping his cousin.
Yeah, so he definitely wasn't a virgin in the sickest, grossest way humanly possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the gist of his childhood.
Well, there is one more thing. His cousin does report this to the police. Mm-hmm. And the police don't do anything about it.
No, they don't believe her.
So she
tries reporting it to multiple different type of authority figures, and no one is believing her.
Just fucking maybe. Had somebody paid attention to this little girl, there wouldn't be
other shit could have happened.
11 and maybe more dead women.
Yeah. There's a lot of instances where this man could have been stopped.
Mishandlings of justice run abundant. That's all I gotta say about that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So, Anthony, there's not a lot on him about his school life, aside from the fact that he did not have enough credits to graduate high school. I couldn't really find anything that said if he was like a good student or an average student or a bad student.
I'm
assuming because he didn't graduate, probably more on the lower
I think he
side.
was more of, if I'm just basing this off of the information describing him into his adulthood, I'm gonna guess that he just was not really into school. If you hear him speak, he is very articulate and intelligent. And
I mean, he could just be one of those people where traditional schooling just isn't really...
Or his home life was so tumultuous that he was acting out. But regardless, it even goes so far as to say that he attended Shaw High School, but the East Cleveland officials said they could find no record of him ever attending that school.
Yeah, that's
so
pretty crazy.
Which I thought was kind of strange. I wondered maybe if he ever even went to high school, if he dropped out.
Well, he left his house at 18 to join the Marines. That was in 1978.
Because he had just gotten a high schooler pregnant.
Yep. And so he had decided to dodge that bullet and get right out of town. And his daughter was actually born 8.5 months after he graduated from boot camp. So
he initially went to join the Army, but then realized that in the person-to-person hierarchy of what is considered the higher bar, he chose the Marines because it felt like he wanted a challenge, he said, and he had heard that the Marines were like the hardest ones to be in and the more superior ones.
As an ex-military spouse, okay.
I was just gonna say there's a little bit of bias here.
My husband is prior Air Force, all right? And I don't want to hear no shit about how the Air Force have it so good. They are spoiled bitches. We know this, but when shit hits the fan, the Air Force comes and bails everyone out. So get off my ass.
So he continues on to the Marine Corps. Marine Corps. That's dark. Marine Corps. It still sounds like corpse.
Still sounds like corpse.
Whatever. He joins the fucking Marines, okay? And this is his way to escape from the household, escape from the deteriorating economy in
Escape
Cleveland.
from his child.
Escape from his child. He joined on the 24th, 1978. He attended the recruit training at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Paris Island in South Carolina, and then was further trained as an electrician at camp. Not even going to try it.
Let me see. What you got?
It's La Chuno in it.
Ooh. Lejeune?
Camp
Lejeune? Lejeune? Lejeune.
Well, I'm still going to call it camp, not even going to try it.
In North Carolina. North Cackalack.
And he served a grand total of 8 years in the Marines.
And it should be noted that he received a ton of praise in the military. He had a rifle sharpshooter award. He had multiple good conduct medals.
But once again,
a certificate of commendation.
Here's an example of a serial killer performing well
in the military.
Like, it blows my mind.
You know, I really just think that very rigid and structured lifestyle that comes with being in the military is beneficial. He was an alcoholic while he was in the military, and he drank heavily. And he actually married a fellow Marine, Kim Yvette Lawson, in 1981. And she literally married him to keep him from getting a dishonorable discharge.
Yeah, I heard that, but I also heard some more stuff from her part. He had trouble displaying emotions. He had trouble holding hands, and she was able to help him with that to get him to express emotions and feel happiness and to be affectionate, which is something that he isn't with anyone ever. So
But
not
I
even
mean-
he later said he's never even hugged a sister.
But I mean, can we just admit, though, that she married him out of pity?
Yeah, it was
Like, this isn't a marriage based on love. This is a pity marriage.
Well, he loved her. He actually described their marriage as the happiest when he was testifying or giving his final statement or whatever you want to say. He attributed the happiest years of his life to when he was married with her.
Well, she divorced his ass in 1985.
Because he's an alcoholic and an asshole.
So he left the military life with, medals and awards and 2 letters of appreciation, and decided to go back home to Cleveland in 1985, where he resumed all his bad habits of drinking heavily. And that at that point in time, this area of Cleveland had major issues with crack. And I shouldn't just say this area of Cleveland. Crack was pretty much an epidemic in most major cities at this point.
But so where Sowell grew up in was a pretty middle-class, predominantly white neighborhood. He was raised in a nice, cute house with a backyard, and it was a good neighborhood. And then he goes away for 8 years and comes back,
And it's just tanked.
it's nothing
The neighborhood
like what it was.
is not what it was. So he comes back home, and the community is just kind of falling apart. Drugs have kind of taken over, especially the drug crack, which, it comes in waves because, let's face it, heroin is a big problem in Cleveland now.
Yeah, heroin is a gigantic problem in Cleveland.
Yeah.
When we were in high school, it was Molly. Molly was really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an impoverished area. East Cleveland is an impoverished area.
It really is. And it's unfortunate because that place used to be so booming and beautiful. So he turns to alcohol to kind of help deal with this, and is quoted as saying that he would have a minimum of 6 drinks nearly every single day during this period. Minimum 6 drinks. Now,
How this man did
I
his
can go
liver
out.
survived.
I can go out for a night and have 6 drinks and be a zombie, dead person walking.
Yeah.
How is he functioning at this point?
Who knows, man?
But he did say that sometimes he would start this first thing in the morning, and then he would usually be blackout drunk by the end of the night.
And during this time, his life hasn't turned out the way that he thought it was going to be, and he's fucking angry.
Yep. Well, in 1988, this comes back to bite him in the ass because he actually gets arrested on a charge of domestic violence and served 8 days in jail, which really isn't very much for domestic violence. And there's not really a lot of details on that, just that he, is slowly building a rap sheet for himself.
Well, in the same year, May 27th, 1988, Rosalind Garner was found strangled in her home on Hayden Avenue in East Cleveland, and that case has not been solved, but it had all the similarities of kind of his rap sheet.
Yeah, in February 27th of 1989, another woman, Carmela Prater, is found dead in an abandoned building on First Avenue. And Prater actually lived on Page Avenue, which is the same street that Sowell lived on at that time. And she had been beaten, but the coroner was unable to pinpoint how she was killed. And that case has also not been solved, but is suspected may be linked to Sowell.
Well, that's the thing. I know at the beginning we said there was 11 murders, but I think there's a lot more than 11 murders.
Well, then in 1989, Mary Thomas is found strangled near an abandoned building on First Avenue, and this is the same street where Prater was found. And again, police can't link him directly to this case, but he's a suspect.
Well, if you think about it, whenever he does finally get caught, we're not there yet, but it's essentially handed to them on the silver platter.
Oh, it really is. So those are 3 women that were killed in very similar ways, very near to where Sowell lives. So do with that information
What you
as
will.
you will. But on July 28th, 1989,
A woman tells police that Sowell took her into his home on Page Avenue, bound and gagged her, and raped her. And let me just say that when he rapes his victims, he doesn't do it once. This is like an
No.
all-night
He
thing.
rapes them orally, vaginally, and anally. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a monster to these women.
And she was 3 months pregnant. As if you could make it any worse. But she did, I don't have information if she was a drug addict, but she did go into his house voluntarily.
Oh, she willingly went into his home.
But he was a very manipulative guy. Like, he was seen around the neighborhood, and while he didn't have meaningful relationships with a ton of people in the neighborhood, he was a face that you knew.
Yep, he was someone that people recognized and knew, and he was prior military, so I'm sure that played into it a little bit.
And he frequently invited people back to his house for drinks.
Yes, he did. So on June 24th, 1990, a Cleveland woman tells police that Sowell choked and raped her inside her home on East 71st Street. So she files a report, and the police arrest him, but no charges are filed because police said they were unable to get the woman to testify.
Well,
But in September
Of the
of
same year.
1990, the same year,
Sowell is sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to the attempted rape of the woman, the aforementioned woman.
in 1989.
And she was the one from the house on Page Avenue. So
Correct.
while the girl we just talked about didn't get justice, at least this
The
kind
prior
of
girl did.
because
and
he
that's
had to
kind of-
serve the full sentence.
Oh, yeah, he did. So he was repeatedly denied parole and was finally released from prison in 2005.
When he got out, he moved in with his father.
Yeah, which is really interesting. Although I want to touch base, though, on the years he spent in prison, because this is another thing
Where he did okay.
that is interesting to me. He is considered a model prisoner. And if you think about it, so was fucking Gacy.
People like
And-
Ed Kemper.
And here's the best part. He was also a chef, which is what Gacy did in prison. Okay, what is with serial killers being model fucking prisoners and then being great at cooking?
I think there is something to the treatment of psychopaths and giving them strict structure
Could be.
and routine and regimen.
Well, he is a model prisoner, has very few incidences while he's in prison, but because of his history, the parole board was just like,
Nah.
no. Nay.
Nay. So he has to register finally as a sex offender. He's literally been a sex offender his entire life, and he's
Yes.
finally having to register as a sex offender.
So please remember this, because this is important. He is a registered sex offender.
And you're required to check in only once a
Once
year,
a
which
year.
is fucking horse shit.
Although that does change. But he is only checking in once a year for several years. So there's not really a lot on what's been going on with him between the years of 2005 and 2007. We do know he is unable to keep a job and that he sells scrap metal to make money and lives off of unemployment, basically. So this takes us to June 29th of 2007. A woman who lives across the street from Sowell calls City Hall to complain about a foul odor in the neighborhood. And she is not the only one who is complaining about this smell.
Yeah, and and what the logical explanation to everybody is going to blame it on this sausage factory
That is
restaurant
literally right next to Sowell's house. Like,
Yeah.
it's his house, a tiny little alley, and then a sausage factory.
thing. Don't laugh.
That's what she said.
fucked up.
So fucked up. So people are going after this sausage factory.
I can't.
Stop.
It's not a good wiener factory. Nope,
Nope,
not better.
Not good. So this poor factory, though, the owners of this factory are paying all kinds of money to have new ventilation.
I think it was like
installed.
$200,000.
Oh, they are doing everything they can to update their building to try to get rid of this smell. And here, it's not even them.
No.
So, in 2008, this is just a little mini segue. The Adam Walsh Act is passed, and Sowell now has to check in with the sheriff office every 90 days instead of once a year.
Yeah, that's much better.
So,
much better.
Much better, but also doesn't help this.
A weird side note that I think kind of peeks into the window of Sowell's brain a little. He had an online dating account where he stated that he was a master looking for a submissive person to train. While again, BDSM is totally normal.
Totally normal in
Totally
consenting
fine.
relationships.
Whenever you have a fucked up, like this dude, gives that whole group of people who live perfectly healthy, happy lives a bad name.
It really does. It really does. Generally speaking, the act of rape isn't so much about a sexual conquest as it is about power.
Power. Yes.
It really is more of a power trip than anything else. It's not really about the sex.
Yeah. It just goes to show for me where his brain is at in terms of like control.
Right.
Like, once again, here's yet another example of a guy that is mentally unwell but not insane, wanting to control women in the most primal way humanly possible.
It's just
Ugh.
as we get into this case further and further, it just makes me angrier and angrier on the way this was handled. And I think it should be important to note that Christina and I are not anti-police.
No.
Not by
not at all.
any means.
Not
But
even kind of.
when there are issues like we will discuss in this case, it's really hard to ignore them. And it's really hard to ignore that, you know, in the other cases that we've talked about, a lot of the victims were prostitutes and drug addicts, but we're talking about the 60s and 70s, where at that point in time, those types of people were very marginalized and weren't taken seriously, if you will. This is happening in 2008.
Yeah.
This is 11 years ago, and the police are not taking this seriously.
Well, because the fact of the matter is that it was a low-income neighborhood filled with people of color, and that had a drug problem and a glaring issue with the police force in Cleveland is neglecting the low-income neighborhoods filled with people of color. I mean, there's no other way to candy coat it. I mean, that's just the truth. And these were... all of his victims were women of color that were drug addicts. They were easy victims.
They were.
And he didn't even bother to like travel far, to travel more than 5 minutes.
All of these women were within that neighborhood. There were, I think, 2 that happened to be there, but most of them lived very close to him in the same vicinity. But unfortunately, their families either didn't report them missing or waited until the bodies had been found to report them missing. And it's unfair to put all the blame on the police when their families should have been filing missing person reports. It's unfair to put it all on the police. But as we get into this more, you'll see that the police really did drop the ball.
I don't like to speak in extremes, so saying that, police are always right or vice versa always wrong is just factually incorrect.
Police are actual people who make mistakes and maybe misread things, and they only know what they know.
The fact of the matter is that the Cleveland police were understaffed, didn't have enough of a budget,
understaffed, underfunded, and just they didn't have the manpower to really handle this. But on the same hand, they don't know that someone is missing unless someone reports them missing.
But there was still a problem with follow-up.
There was a problem with follow-up, and I will give you that. And I think a lot of that had to do with drug addiction and the neighborhoods where these people lived. And, you know, it's unfortunate that it happened the way it did. But there also seems to be a pattern of police neglecting to really look into these serial killers.
No. I mean, it's an unfortunate reality.
It really is. It just makes me extra sad that this happened as near as 2008. That's, I think, what gets me the most is I thought in 2008 things were
So much more advanced than what they were.
Yeah, that really makes me sad.
Well, so he's in jail. He does really well. He's a model inmate. He actually gets his GED.
Yeah.
I mean, he does well in prison.
Although, I find it interesting. So, the one thing that I was reading is that he signed up for these classes for sex offenders, right? And it's like a rehab for sex offenders. But he's unwilling to admit that he's a sex offender. He's literally in prison for rape, but he's unwilling to admit that he's a sex offender.
I don't know how to unpack that.
I don't either. I don't know if
He's that much of a narcissist that he believes that the women enjoyed it?
No, I think that he's manipulating the parole board, or at least trying
I see.
to manipulate the parole board. I think at this point he's just doing whatever he can to make himself look good, because he does do multiple different rehabs, and he goes to Alcohol Anonymous, and he does all this shit that really makes him look good. Now, that could be narcissism, trying to make himself look better than he is. I mean, it's definitely manipulative. But, I mean, can we just acknowledge what a piece of shit this dude is? Like, you're literally in prison for rape, and you refuse to acknowledge that you're a sex offender?
Delusions of grandeur.
For real.
He's clean. I mean, he joins the 12-step program. He manages to, at least according to all information, not get into any of the alcohol or any of that stuff in jail, which is something that is very prominent.
Yeah.
You can usually access alcohol and drugs easier in jail than you can out on the streets.
Which
so
is unfortunate.
That's saying something. But all of the effort that he put into like furthering his education and trying to rehabilitate himself kind of went out the window as soon as he walked out of there.
Oh, yeah. It's like he walked out the door of the prison and was just like, all right, done with that.
Did what I had to do.
Did what I had to do to survive prison and get out, and now I'm out, so I'm just going to do what I want to do. And, you know, he's not on, like, probation or anything like that at this point. Like, he served his 15 years. He's out. He's free. All he had to do was register as a sex offender.
In November 10th of 2008, Barbara Carmichael sees her daughter Tanya, 52, for what would be the last time. Tanya Carmichael's car is found near East 115th Street and Kinsman Road a few days later, but there is no sign of her.
So this is one of the few people who had a missing persons report filed on them. Barbara files a missing persons report in December in Warrensville Heights, which is near Cleveland, and she tells police that, you know, her daughter has a drug problem and sometimes would disappear for a few days, but at this point she hasn't seen her daughter in 3 weeks, and she's really worried that something bad has happened to her.
December 8th, 2008, a bleeding woman runs up to a police car on East 116th Street in Kinsman. She tells police that Anthony Sowell asked her if she wanted to drink beer with him. When she said no, he punched her, choked her, and tried to rip off her clothes. There's that anger that we were talking about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he definitely has major anger issues. So the police go to Sowell's home, went to the 3rd floor, and arrested him. But then no charges are filed against him because the woman didn't want to talk to the detectives. So, issue 1 of him slipping through the cracks because the woman didn't want to talk to detectives. And this is so hard because this takes us into the rape culture that is prominent in America and how women don't want to come forward about the abuses that they suffer from.
I mean, there's so much that we don't know in this little statement here because, you know, if they thought that she was a streetwalker, they may not have taken her seriously.
Or if she was a drug addict, which we know many of them are, she may not be taken seriously.
Or, you know, Anthony was known for making threats that if you go to the police, I will find you, my people will find you, and I'll kill you.
So that takes us to February 10th of 2009. Warrensville Heights police checked several houses between East 116th Street and East 120th Street near Kinsman Road and Oakfield Avenue. So they're looking for Carmichael because her mother has filed a police report. No one knows photos of her, haven't seen her, and that was pretty much all they do.
Yeah.
Like, they basically go around with, have you seen this woman photos? And everyone's like, nope, hasn't seen her. And so they're just like, okay, we're done.
So, you know, during this time that he is supposed to be checking in every 90 days.
Yes, at this point, he's having to check in every 90 days.
Well, he attacks a woman in this time. So how is the fact that this is what blows my mind. So how's the fact that this, regardless of whether or not she wanted to continue the conversation with detectives, she shows up bloody and abused to a police car and is able to name her attacker, who is on probation or whatever you want to call it, or has all these priors from.
And they don't. I know. I know. And I mean, I don't know if that's like an evidence thing. Like, there's just not enough evidence at this point because she hasn't come back.
I'm disgruntled.
I know. It really sucks. So in September, Sowell goes and checks in at the sheriff's office as he's supposed to do. So we should note that he is following all the rules set in place for him as a registered sex offender. He never misses an appointment. He checks in whenever he's supposed to. He's doing what he's supposed to do, quote unquote, while raping women. And the sheriffs come later that month and pay a surprise visit to him to verify that he lives at the address that he's given. And the deputies are not required to enter the premise. They just have to go and make sure that, hey, he does actually live there and everything is hunky-dory.
And then several hours later, Sowell goes out and persuades a woman to come back to his house and drink a 40. Then she later tells police that he got angry, choked her with an extension cord, then raped her until she passed out. She was able to get away after promising Sowell she would bring him $50 and not tell police about the incident, according to a police report.
But she immediately went and reported it. So kudos to her. She immediately went and reported him to the police. And the case is assigned to a sex crime.
Sex crime.
The case is assigned to a sex crime detective, but he has difficulty reaching out to her. And he gets in touch with her mom, who tells her that she can be kind of difficult to get into contact with, but, like, keep trying. But the victim in that case doesn't show up for interviews, and they can't get in touch with her. It's kind of crazy.
In these communities, so often do they feel that the police are enemies and or have failed them. And so very frequently,
they don't have any trust in the police.
They don't have any trust in the police. So that's part and parcel to why sometimes these women aren't showing up to detectives. And also, bear in mind, this is immensely traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
You have to recant and relive the worst moments of your life very, very, very shortly after they happen. Sometimes that in itself is enough for women to just not be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's a very traumatic experience, and most women just don't want to talk about it. They want to report it the one time, and then they want something to be done. And unfortunately,
It's more complicated.
Our justice system just doesn't work that way. But, I mean, it is what it is.
This next thing that happens on October 20th is one of the most fucked up stories I have ever heard, and also one of the most amazing stories of courageousness from a woman in this kind of situation that you could...
hell yeah.
Oh my God. So an ambulance is sent to Sowell's house after neighbors call 911 to report a naked woman falling or being thrown from a second floor window. Sowell tells the rescue workers that he and the woman had been doing drugs all day and that she accidentally fell out of Sowell's home while they were having sex. That's what he told them.
Did you see the security cam footage from this?
Yes.
Okay, so remember, he lives next to a sausage factory. And there are security cameras up around the sausage factory. So if you go on YouTube and look this up, there is security cam footage of this woman falling out of his house. And he comes out naked after her. Butt-ass naked. And is telling his neighbors, like, oh, we were having sex and she fell out the window. We've been doing drugs all day. Like, it was an accident. It's my girlfriend. And she is, like, bleeding from the nose, bleeding from the mouth. I mean, she's
in bad
she's in rough shape.
She leapt out of the window to try and escape him. That's what she did. She was able to come to enough and try and escape.
Yep. So the EMS take her to Metro, which is a big hospital in Cleveland, and they call the police. And the police go to Sowell's home, but they don't find anyone there. And so the police go up to the hospital, and the woman refuses to talk.
So the woman from the September 22nd attack meets with sex crimes detectives who one day later get an arrest warrant for Sowell and a search warrant for his home.
So it's important to note that originally detectives couldn't find her and couldn't get in touch with her, but she finally comes back to talk to them, which thank God she did.
Oh my God. If she hadn't done this, the body count would have been so much higher.
So much higher. So the police go to arrest Sowell, but he's not home. And they have just a very basic search warrant. They're there to look for evidence for her specific case. And they walk in and find 2 decomposing bodies on his living room floor.
I mean, the smell of death is... If anybody talks about this, they're going to talk about the foul smell of death that permeated the neighborhood.
Oh, I mean, it wasn't just like his house. People could not handle the smell in the neighborhood.
They were literally leaving the neighborhood. It was so bad.
Yeah.
But so when the officers walk into the home, it is like a putrid wall of not only death and decomposing bodies, but filth.
You know what's interesting is it has only been a month, 1 month, since the police officers came to knock on his door to verify his address.
Yeah.
How did they not smell that putrid ass stench when he opened the door?
You know, and
I mean, I understand that the whole neighborhood smelled, but when he opened his door, wouldn't...
it makes me wonder if maybe they had never been around decomp before, because any investigator that we've heard do interviews that has been around a decomposing
they said
body,
you know what that smell is.
Like in the John Wayne Gacy case,
Yeah.
those bodies were fucking buried.
Yeah.
And the guy was able to smell it over a barbecue.
Yeah. It doesn't...
I don't know.
Doesn't make sense.
I mean, maybe I guess maybe the sausage factory truly was the smell of putrid meat from like leftover.
Maybe they actually believed that it was coming from the sausage factory.
I don't know, but that's crazy to me.
So the police have to go and get the homicide squad for this. Like,
Shit has escalated.
This is not just sex crimes. This is much more. They have to get a whole different search warrant. It's a fucking shit show. So
on All Hallows Eve, 2009.
Yeah, they go in the house and they find 3 more bodies in addition to the 2 that were on the living room floor. So there's 2 in a crawl space and 1 buried in the basement's dirt floor.
On Halloween, Sowell is arrested walking down Mount Auburn. My God, we are both struggling with these streets today. Mount Auburn Avenue, about 1 mile from his home. So they got the warrant for him 2 days prior, and he really wasn't missing in action all that long. It didn't take them long to find him, thank God.
No, I'm sure he knew the jig was up at this point.
So, I mean, things finally start picking up for justice at this point.
So he's arrested. He's in police custody, and he's charged with 5 counts of aggravated murder. But during the investigation, police find 6 more bodies in his home, and most of them are buried in the backyard. But that's 6 more bodies. So we're up to 11 victims that are buried in and around his house.
The Cuyahoga County coroner announces that all 11 victims are Black women, and at least 8 of them were strangled, the coroner says. He makes the first identification of a victim, Tanya Carmichael.
And if you remember correctly, her mother had been looking for her for a couple years at this point.
The next day, police identify a second and third victim, Talicia Fortson and Tishana Culver. Fortson was last seen in June of that year, and Culver lived 4 houses down and was last seen in 2008.
And what's really sad, and this is what I mean about police not knowing what they don't know, Culver's family actually said they just assumed she was in jail or living in Akron with her boyfriend. That breaks my heart. I mean, I know these women were drug addicts, and I'm sure their families,
like, they get dismissed by the justice system because of them being a drug addict. It makes me insane, because when people describe victims or whatever, they always have to include this supposedly like integral part of their personality of them being a drug addict, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this human being is entitled to live their life and do drugs without someone killing them.
Yeah, and I don't even mean that either. I just mean it's sad that her family never even reported her missing.
Yeah, they thought that.
They just assumed she was in jail. And to me, that's really sad.
Or like living with her boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even question it. And I think these 2 girls, honestly, their families didn't even come forward until it hit the news, and then their families were like, oh,
shit,
maybe I should report her missing after her bodies have already been found.
So the East Cleveland Police announced on November 6, 2009 that they are reopening the investigations into the strangulations of Garner and Thomas and the killing of Prater. Cleveland police identify a 4th woman found at Sowell's home as Nancy Cobbs, who was 43.
The next day, police identified 3 more of the victims, Michelle Mason, Crystal Dozier, and Imelda Hunter. And those are all his victims.
Monday, November 9th, why are all my weird things that I'm saying coming out have to do with like
having a
murder
really
and
hard time
corpse?
Today.
What the fuck ever.
Basically, on November 9th, they bring cadaver dogs back and are searching his house some more. 2 cadaver dogs went into an abandoned school building about a block and a half from Sowell's house. And, you know, this building has been abandoned for, 20-something years. And an 8th victim is identified as Janice Webb.
So, the cadaver dog was brought back to the backyard of Sowell's neighbor. The home had been vacant since March of 2008. That's where Janice Webb was found. The Cuyahoga County prosecutor Bill Mason announced that a grand jury returned an indictment against Anthony for assaulting and raping a 36-year-old female on September 22nd, 2009.
Which you all remember, September 22nd. Mm-hmm. That was the day that the police came and knocked on his door to verify his address, and then literally hours later, he raped and killed her.
So, one small victory for the victims and the victims' family is the Cleveland police went back to the Imperial Avenue home with a bulldozer, tearing up a neighboring home's backyard. So they don't have to stare at this house of horrors anymore.
Oh, no. They tore down the entire house. I mean, it's gone. It's just an empty lot now.
It's an empty lot now. The FBI agents will be checking the yard for evidence, or were checking the yard for evidence. 25-year-old LaShonda Long has been identified. The identification of Miss Long was complicated by the fact that only her skull was available to the Cuyahoga County coroner.
This is the girl. Didn't they find her skull in a bucket? Mm-hmm. They found this poor woman's skull. That's all they found of her in a bucket in his house.
Which is crazy because the last time they saw her was in August of 2008. So it's not like she had been dead for a crazy long time.
No. Yeah. It's very sad. But what the FBI said they were going to do was take a look at Anthony Sowell's timeline and see where he lived throughout the United States during his time in the military. And they're going to look and see if there's any unsolved violent crimes that match his profile and see if they can link them back to Anthony.
So at this time, the victims that are identified, their families finally get to lay them to rest. And they're finally able to have funerals and have answers.
One thing that I think is really sad is this was in an interview I watched on YouTube about him, is one of the victim's sisters was showing the reporter where her sister was buried, and the reporter commented that she didn't have a headstone. Mm-hmm. And her sister is quoted as saying that the city said they would pay for headstones for all of Anthony's victims. Mm-hmm. And it had been a couple years, and they still hadn't been able to get a headstone for her.
Yeah, the city also said that the vacant land that the home was torn down on would become a memorial.
And nothing is there.
Nothing is there.
It's just an empty lot.
But, again, this is kind of the narrative about people in the ghetto.
Yeah.
That oftentimes, or most of the time, they're just kind of pushed to the side and forgotten. Whereas this is one of the most heinous crimes in Cleveland, Ohio history.
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
goddamn, in the history of the United States.
He's one of the most prolific modern serial killers. The police and the FBI are back out at his house several more times, but they don't really find anything else. And eventually, in December, he is charged with 85 counts, including murder, kidnapping, rape, and abuse of a corpse, and he faces the death penalty. And this motherfucker's lawyers try to say that he is not guilty by reason of insanity, and the psychologists are basically like, no,
he is not insane. If you could just hear this dude talk, he is not. He's disturbed for sure. He is absolutely disturbed. But again, I know after the last episode, I said it'll probably be the last guy would have been one of the rare people I said actually wasn't insane, and this dude is also not insane, not at all. Deeply disturbed, but not insane.
So basically, the jury finds him guilty, recommends the death sentence, the judge agrees. Yeah. So that happens. Well, he appeals this to the Supreme Court of Ohio, and his execution was originally set for October 29th of 2012, but in March of that year, a stay of execution was filed, and that was granted pending final disposition of the appeal. So basically, they're appealing based on that. They're claiming, Sowell's lawyers are claiming that he did not receive a fair trial because of the extensive media coverage, and that the media attention was so overwhelming that there was no way that a jury could have been found in Cleveland that wouldn't be biased.
They described it as both frenzied and sustained.
Bullshit, dude. And that the courtroom had been closed to the public during an evidentiary hearing and while a jury was picked. the third reason was that he had received lousy legal representation and that Sowell's trial attorney should have had their client plead guilty to killing the women and then focus their efforts on preventing Sowell from getting the death penalty.
He left women alive. He had survivors testifying. There was 11 confirmed mutilated bodies. No, dude. No. Fuck you. And I'm sorry. I know attorneys are doing their job and they don't always get to, that sometimes they have to do their best to represent the clients that they have, but seriously, fuck you.
Basically, the state was just like, no.
Thank you, Ohio.
They rejected his appeal and basically reaffirmed his aggravated murder convictions and death sentence. In May of 2017, Sowell appealed his case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that they would not review this shit.
Nay. Good job.
Nay. So they denied his request to reopen his appeal, and that was all she wrote, folks. He's going down.
So, as part of his defense team, this is a little bit about the flimsy psychology that I found. George Woods is an expert who was paid $350 an hour by Sowell's defense team.
Dr. Woods said that Sowell was obsessive compulsive and that he would obsessively count things, including other inmates, food, utensils, you name it, he counted it. And I don't know. I mean, I
don't understand why he was brought in by the defense. Like, what did they think that was going to serve?
I mean, unless they were really trying to run with the guilty by reason of insanity. I mean, it says he has a cognitive disorder, but and disassociation, maybe, like he got so blackout angry that he disassociated what he was doing. But the fact of the matter is that he still killed 11 women in a horrific manner. And
don't you have to prove that you were insane in the moments that you did those attacks as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know. I mean, it was flimsy at best, is what I guess is what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's just, I remember the media coverage surrounding this case. I remember hearing about it, and I remember hearing that he had buried 11 women in the walls of his house.
Yeah, I remember hearing that as well.
I mean, which obviously now from researching the case, we know that they weren't really in the walls of his house.
Mm-hmm. Crawl space.
Very gacy. Very gacy.
Yeah.
And I just remember hearing about this and being so horrified by it. And now that we're looking into it, at first I was like, Anthony Sowell. Like, that name sounds familiar, but I couldn't place why I knew his name. Mm-hmm. And then when I Googled him, I was like, oh yeah,
this motherfucker.
This dude.
So we need some serial killer memes.
Oh, yes. And I have a whole bunch to share with you.
Okay, it is the palate cleanser. Yeah. You've been posting some good ones on our Instagram page, which, by the way, my darlings and dolls, if you want to support our podcast, the best way to do that is leave us a review wherever you listen to the damn thing. Give us a follow at The Killer T and Facebook at The Killer T. And what else do we have? Do we have anything else?
No.
We have a website, but the website is just kind of like a placeholder.
Yeah, the website is just kind of like a...
It's so nobody can steal our web address.
You know, in case we ever wanted to actually have a web address. I got some memes.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let me set the scene for you on this one.
Okay, we're good.
It's Ted Bundy. And it says, so there I was, trying to get stiff before she did.
Oh my God.
What did Jeffrey Dahmer say to Lorena Bobbitt? Excuse me, you gonna eat that?
Oh.
I'm
saying. Nasty.
Murderer, trying to break into my home, struggling with the baby gate. Me, it's you have to pull with your thumb while you lift. Murderer, like this? I don't. Yeah, now lift. Murderer, jiggling gate. You know what? I'll try a different house. You have a good night. See? This is why we have so many goddamn baby gates in the house. They're impossible to open.
You know how socially acceptable it is to make jokes about killing your husband, but if anybody makes jokes about killing your wife, that is very bad news bears.
It is a double standard.
If somebody took away my right to talk about killing my husband, I don't know what I would do. I feel like that is 50% of my conversation.
Okay, well then our husband should be able to equally be allowed to talk about killing us.
In my marriage, it's totally fine. If he wants to make a few strangulation jokes that are both sexual in context and also about murder, I'm fine with it. But nobody better take away my fucking right to joke about killing my husband with arsenic, because that passive aggression allows me to make it through my day.
You know what? We didn't talk about this, but Anthony Sowell is African American, and he is one of the very few African American serial killers.
Oh yeah, we totally did not talk about
Because,
that.
let's be honest, most serial killers are angry white men.
I was literally just going to say angry white men at the exact same time as you. I'm glad I held back so we didn't do that gross thing again. We've managed to not be too gross this episode.
No, but we did say nay at the same time. We watched too much Bailey Sarian.
We forgot the Jeffrey scale.
We totally forgot the Jeffrey scale.
Damn it.
Hi guys, this is future Christina and cell phone Chelsea.
Yeah.
How do you rank Anthony on the Jeffrey scale?
So, I'm going to put him at like a 5 or 6. Because, like, while what he did was horrific and gross, it's not the worst we've talked about.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a solid 5.
Yeah.
All of the things that you just said, but unfortunately, there's
worse.
There's way worse. All right. Well, thank you, future Chelsea from the cell phone world.
Thank you, future Christina, for noticing we forgot our very important Jeffrey scale.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Next week, I hope you will join us while we talk about the Black Widow, Nanny Doss.